The day my husband told my father to come collect his daughter like I was unwanted furniture, I realized I had never truly known the man I married. It happened in our Lake Tahoe house. The house my father gifted us on our wedding day. The house Jason liked to call his when he was in a good mood. He didn't even look angry when he did it. That was the part that unsettled me most. He looked bored. I was standing at the kitchen island, rinsing blueberries for breakfast. The lake outside the windows was silver and still. Morning light spilled across the marble countertops, imported from Italy, chosen by me. I'd spent months designing this kitchen. Jason walked in wearing his navy quarter-zip and that smug half-smile he used in sales meetings. He dropped a manila envelope onto the island. It slid across the marble and stopped in front of me. "Sign those," he said casually. "It'll make this easier." I dried my hands slowly before opening it. Annulment papers. Not divorce. Annulment. As if our 5-year marriage had been some clerical error. I looked up at him. "You're joking." "No," he said. "I'm correcting a mistake." The words didn't land all at once. They floated, then settled, cold and deliberate. "Jason." He held up a hand. "Before you start crying, let's get something straight. Your father's empire is collapsing. Everyone knows it. The banks are circling. You don't come with the Bennett safety net anymore." There it was. Not grief. Not betrayal. Calculation. I felt something in my chest shift. Not break. Shift. "You married me," I said quietly. He laughed. "I married into stability." Then he did something I will never forget. He propped his phone against a fruit bowl and tapped the screen. FaceTime. My father answered on the third ring. "Owen Bennett," Jason said brightly. Perfect timing. My father looked tired. I noticed that immediately. He'd aged in the past few weeks. The stress of the failed redevelopment deal had carved new lines into his face. Jason turned the phone so my father could see me. "Come get your daughter," he said. Silence. "What?" my father asked. "1 hour," Jason continued, glancing at his watch. "Or I call security and have her escorted off the property." Property. Not home. Security. Not husband. My father's jaw tightened. "Jason, that house is in both our names," Jason cut in smoothly. "And I'm initiating annulment, which means she has no claim to my assets. And since your portfolio's in freefall, she has nowhere else to land." He leaned closer to the camera. "I'm not running a charity." I expected my father to explode. He didn't. He studied Jason the way he used to study blueprints before deciding whether a foundation would hold. "Harper," he said calmly, ignoring Jason. "Are you safe?" "Yes." Jason scoffed. 1 hour, he repeated. "Or I call security." He ended the call. The kitchen went silent again. Outside, the lake remained perfectly calm. Inside, something much colder was forming. "You're really going to throw me out?" I asked. Jason shrugged. "I don't see the benefit in prolonging this." "What changed?" I asked. He smiled without warmth. "Your value." There it was. Clear. Honest. Ugly. I felt the sting, but not the way he expected. Not tears. Not pleading. Clarity. "Did your mother put you up to this?" I asked. His expression flickered. "Just slightly." "Don't drag my mom into it." Linda Reed. The woman who used to introduce me as her elegant daughter-in-law. The woman who reminded guests, loudly, that I came from old California money. The woman who had been unusually quiet since my father's deal collapsed. Jason picked up the envelope and tapped it. "Sign it. Pack a bag. Call your dad. And if I don't..." He stepped closer. "Then I freeze the joint accounts and make this ugly." I held his gaze. "You think I didn't see this coming?" he added softly. "You've been spoiled your whole life. You don't know how the real world works." I almost smiled. He had no idea how wrong he was. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving the papers behind. I stared at the lake. 1 hour. He thought I would panic. He thought I would beg my father to rescue me. He thought I was the fragile extension of a collapsing empire. What he didn't know was that I had grown up watching my father negotiate with men exactly like him. And men like Jason always made one mistake. They mistook patience for weakness. I picked up the annulment papers, and I started reading. 5 years earlier, I believed I had married for love. That's the dangerous thing about believing in fairy tales. You don't notice the imbalance until someone tilts the table. I met Jason Reed at a roofing supplier conference in San Diego. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My father had asked me to sit in on a panel about sustainable materials because I'd just finished a design certification focused on coastal properties. Jason was charismatic, confident without being flashy, ambitious without being arrogant. At least that's what I thought. He was a regional sales manager then. Smart, sharp suits, hungry eyes. He told me he admired that I worked instead of coasting on the Bennett name. That line hooked me. Most men either feared my last name or chased it. Jason pretended it didn't matter. He made me feel like Harper, not Owen Bennett's daughter. We dated quietly for a year. My father observed him carefully. He never interfered. That wasn't his style. He would just ask questions over dinner. What does he want in 10 years? How does he handle disappointment? Who benefits most from this marriage? At the time, I thought he was being overly analytical. Now I understand, he was looking for fault lines. When Jason proposed, it was on the deck of the Tahoe property. The lake was gold at sunset. He got down on one knee, voice steady, eyes bright. I don't need your father's money, he said. I just need you. I believed him. My father gifted us the house at the wedding reception, not as a showpiece, as a foundation. He stood up, tapped his champagne glass, and said, "Marriage needs something solid to stand on. So I'm putting the Tahoe house into both their names. Equal ownership, equal responsibility." Jason squeezed my hand so tightly, I thought it was affection. It wasn't. It was triumph. The house wasn't a mansion. It wasn't some absurd billionaire compound. It was elegant, modern, warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A private dock. Clean lines. Designed for family. Jason walked through it the first night whispering, "This is ours." But he always said ours in a way that sounded like mine. At first, our life felt balanced. I handled design consultations remotely for my father's firm. Jason climbed steadily in his company. We hosted dinners. We took photos by the lake. We looked perfect. But there were small shifts I ignored. Jason insisted on managing the joint accounts for efficiency. He liked reminding people that he'd married up, but worked his way there. He started correcting me in front of his friends. Small things. Harmless on the surface. "You're not used to budgeting, babe. You wouldn't understand how sales margins work. Let me handle the grown-up stuff." I laughed them off, because I believed love meant adjusting. His mother, Linda Reed, adored me in public. "Oh, Harper brings such refinement to the family," she'd say at holidays. But in private, she would ask pointed questions. "Your father's company, it's not over-leveraged, is it? You're sure that house is safe from creditors?" I told her yes, because at the time it was. Jason's pride grew in proportion to what he thought he controlled. The Tahoe house became his trophy. He invited colleagues for weekend stays. He stood on the deck telling stories about smart real estate moves. He let people assume he had negotiated the purchase. I never corrected him. I thought protecting his ego was kindness. Looking back, that was my first mistake. The imbalance wasn't financial. It was psychological. Jason needed to feel superior. And as long as my father's empire stood tall, he couldn't. When my father's coastal redevelopment project began facing delays, Jason grew unusually attentive to financial news. When rumors of lender pressure surfaced, he started asking more detailed questions. When the market shifted, his tone shifted too. I remember one evening on that same deck where he had proposed. The lake was dark, wind restless. He stared out at the water and said, "You know, if something ever happened to your dad's company, we have to make hard choices." I laughed softly. "Nothing's happening." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. That was the first time I saw it. Not fear. Opportunity. I just didn't understand yet what kind. And I certainly didn't imagine that one day, in that same kitchen, He would use the house my father gifted us as a weapon against me. But fairy tales don't collapse all at once. They crack quietly, until someone decides to push. The call came on a Sunday. We were in Jason's mother's backyard, pretending to be a normal family. Linda had insisted on hosting a casual barbecue. She wore pearls with her linen blouse like she was meeting a senator instead of flipping burgers. Jason manned the grill, laughing loudly, performing. I was slicing watermelon at the patio table when my phone vibrated.
Dad.
I smiled automatically and answered. Hey, Harper. His voice stopped me. It wasn't tired. It was wrecked, like something heavy had finally crushed through. I stepped away from the table, toward the side of the house where the bougainvillea climbed the fence. What happened? Silence. Then a long breath. The Seacliff redevelopment deal had imploded. The words felt unreal. That project had been years in the making. Coastal permits, environmental approvals, infrastructure bonds. What do you mean imploded? The lead investor pulled out. 2 secondary lenders triggered protective clauses. They're demanding early repayment. If I can't stabilize liquidity in the next 30 days, they'll force asset liquidation. My hand went cold against the phone. Liquidation. That wasn't a setback. That was collapse. Jason's laughter echoed from the grill. I felt like I was standing in 2 worlds at once. How bad? I whispered. I may lose everything, he said quietly. Commercial holdings, land banks, possibly even the downtown offices. I leaned against the wall. You've survived downturns before. Not like this. His voice cracked just slightly. That terrified me more than the numbers. I should have diversified more aggressively last year, he murmured. I trusted the projections. I didn't anticipate the rate spike. For the first time in my life, my father sounded human. Not strategic. Not unshakable. Just human. Harper, he said softer now, I need you to be prepared. Things might get uncomfortable. Media could circle. People we thought were partners may not be. Behind me, I heard Linda's voice. Harper, tell your father to bring one of his famous Cabernet cases next time. I swallowed. Dad. Jason's here. I figured. Another pause. You need to protect yourself. The words were simple, but deliberate. I'm fine, I said quickly. We're fine. Are you? Something in his tone made my stomach twist. Yes. I wanted that to be true. Listen, he continued. If things escalate, don't panic. We'll handle it.
We, not I.
That was unusual. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. I need to speak to counsel. The call ended. I stood there staring at the blank screen. The world hadn't changed physically. The grass was still green. The lake breeze still moved through the trees. But something foundational had shifted. I walked back toward the patio. Jason looked up immediately. He read my face. What's wrong? He asked, tone neutral but eye sharp. It's Dad, I said. Linda set down her wine glass slowly. What about him? She asked. I forced my voice steady. The Seacliff project collapsed. Lenders are pressing him. He might have to liquidate assets. Silence. Jason didn't speak. He just watched me. Linda's lips pursed. Oh my, she said lightly. That's unfortunate. Jason flipped a burger. So, he said casually. How exposed is he? I blinked. I don't know. But is it temporary? He pressed. Or catastrophic? The word landed like a test. I don't know. I repeated. He nodded slowly. Markets are brutal, he said. You can't overextend. Linda sipped her wine. Well, she said, glancing at the house behind us, at least you two have this place secured. Jason's eyes flicked toward the lake. Then back to me. Yes, he said. At least we have this. The tone was different. Measuring. Calculating. The barbecue continued, but the warmth was gone. Jason laughed a little too loudly. Linda asked a few too many questions about asset shielding. I felt it. A shift in the air. That night, back at Tahoe, Jason was unusually quiet. He sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through financial news. 30 days, he asked without looking at me. Yes. He nodded. And if he can't stabilize? He might lose most of it. Jason exhaled slowly. Then he looked at me in a way I had never seen before. Not as his wife. Not as his partner. But as risk. I felt the ground drop out from under me. Not because of my father's deal, but because I realized something far worse. The collapse wasn't just financial. It was relational. And I had just watched my husband calculate my worth in real time. That was the moment everything changed. I just didn't know how quickly it would unravel. I used to believe love faded slowly, that it dimmed like a sunset. I was wrong. Sometimes it switches off like a light. The morning after my father's call, Jason woke before me. I could hear him in the kitchen, coffee grinder, cabinet doors, the low murmur of financial news playing from his phone. When I walked in, he didn't look up. No kiss. No good morning. Just, did your dad call again? Not yet. He nodded, scrolling. I studied him carefully. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't worried for me. He was alert, watching numbers, watching headlines, watching for confirmation that the Bennett name was losing altitude. Linda called before noon. Jason put her on speaker. So, she began brightly, I've been thinking. That sentence had never once led to anything good. If Owen is overleveraged, creditors may come after extended family assets. They can't, I said calmly. His liabilities are corporate. Well, she replied sweetly, lawsuits can be creative. Jason didn't defend me. He didn't reassure me. He just listened. Linda continued, you two should review ownership structures. Protect yourselves.
We.
Not Harper. The implication was clear. Jason cleared his throat. We'll look into it. After the call ended, he stood at the window facing the lake. You never mentioned how aggressive your father's debt position was, he said. It wasn't aggressive, I replied. It was strategic. He turned slowly. Strategic doesn't implode. There was no warmth in his eyes. It was like someone had shut a door behind them. You're talking like he's already bankrupt, I said. He might be. And if he is? I asked quietly. Jason held my gaze. Then things change. There it was again. Value recalculated. I moved closer. Are you afraid we'll lose the house? He hesitated. Too long. I'm afraid of being dragged down by someone else's mistakes. Someone else. Not your father. Not family. Just liability. That evening, Linda invited us to dinner.
Her tone was different now.
No praise. No sparkling compliments about my taste or refinement. She looked at me like I had spilled red wine on her carpet. During dinner, she casually mentioned a friend whose daughter had married into disaster. Poor thing, Linda sighed. Ended up moving back home. No prenup protection. Just naive. Jason cut his steak carefully. No one plans for collapse, he said. Linda's eyes flicked to me. Smart women do. I set down my fork. I'm right here, I said evenly. Of course you are, dear, she replied. We're just discussing prudence. Prudence. Not loyalty.
Not partnership.
After dinner, Jason stayed behind on the patio with her. I watched through the sliding glass doors. They spoke in low voices. Linda leaned in. Jason nodded. At one point, he ran his hand through his hair the way he did when he was considering a negotiation. When we drove back to Tahoe, he was silent. You're acting like I did something wrong, I finally said. He kept his eyes on the road. You didn't. Then what is this? He exhaled. It's reality. Reality, I repeated.
Yes.
I didn't marry into chaos, Harper. I stared at him. You married me. He didn't answer. The love didn't fade. It retracted, like it had never been anchored to me at all. Over the next week, small cruelties began. He moved money from our joint savings for diversification. He stopped discussing bills. He changed passwords. He began sleeping on the far edge of the bed. When I reached for him one night, he shifted away. Don't, he muttered. The word wasn't angry. It was dismissive. The final shift came 3 days later. We were having coffee in the kitchen when Linda arrived unannounced. She looked around slowly. This place is expensive to maintain, she said. Utilities alone must be brutal. Jason nodded. It is.
She turned to me.
If Owen collapses fully, you can't expect Jason to carry everything. Carry everything. As if I were dead weight. I've always worked, I said calmly. Linda smiled thinly. Not in the real world, dear. Jason didn't contradict her. That's when I understood. It wasn't just fear. It was alignment. Mother and son. Calculating together. Repositioning. And I, apparently, was the asset depreciating on their books. That night, Jason didn't come to bed at all. I found him in his office at 2 a.m., reviewing documents. What are you doing? I asked. Planning, he replied. For what?
He looked at me then.
And there was nothing there. No love. No hesitation. Just distance. You should start thinking about contingency plans too, he said. For what? I repeated. In case your father doesn't recover. That was the moment I understood. The switch hadn't just turned off. It had flipped direction. And whatever Jason was planning, it did not include me. The humiliation didn't arrive all at once. It came disguised as temporary, just until things stabilize. That's what Linda said the first morning she handed me a printed chore list.
Yes.
A list. She had driven up to Tahoe to help us reorganize during uncertainty. By reorganize, she meant reposition me. Jason stood beside her at the kitchen island while she smoothed the paper flat. If Owen's situation worsens, she began, it's important we tighten household efficiency. Household efficiency. I looked at the list. Deep clean pantry. Laundry rotation schedule. Meal prep plan. Inventory logging. Weekly expense reporting. This is ridiculous, I said calmly. Jason sighed like I was being unreasonable. Mom's just trying to help. By turning me into staff, I asked. Linda gave a delicate laugh. No one is turning you into anything, Harper. But if Jason becomes the sole financial pillar, you should contribute meaningfully. I stared at her. I have always contributed. Emotionally, she said sweetly. But that doesn't pay mortgages. The cruelty wasn't loud. It was polished. Jason didn't defend me. He avoided my eyes. And that was worse. Within days, the shift was complete. Linda stayed in the guest room. She rose early and inspected the kitchen. She commented on dust, on laundry folding technique, on grocery choices. Organic is indulgent during instability, she remarked once, removing items from my cart at the store. Jason began eating whatever she cooked instead of what I prepared. He praised her meals. Feels traditional, he said. Traditional. As if I were some temporary modern experiment that had failed. When I pushed back, he'd rub his temples. Can we not fight right now? I'm under enough pressure. Pressure. From what? His job was fine. His income untouched. The only instability was my father's. And somehow that justified everything. One afternoon, Linda handed me Jason's dry cleaning receipt. He's too busy to pick this up. I looked at her. You're closer to town. She smiled. And you're currently available. Available. Unemployed. Unanchored. Devalued. Jason started coming home later. When he was there, he stayed in his office. Door closed. Phone angled away from view. Once, I overheard him speaking sharply. No, she doesn't know yet. Silence. Then, yes. We'll handle it. When I entered the room, he ended the call. Who was that? I asked. Work. His tone was clipped. Everything became work. Work emails. Work dinners. Work stress. And Linda filled the space he left behind. She rearranged cabinets. Replaced my linens. Critiqued my clothing. Perhaps avoid designer labels for now, she suggested one morning. Optics matter. Optics. As if I were a liability to manage. One evening, I found her in the master closet. She was examining my jewelry box. That was a wedding gift from my aunt, I said, standing in the doorway. She didn't flinch, just assessing assets. Those are mine. She turned slowly. In a marriage, very little is just yours. The message was clear. Ownership was shifting. Power was consolidating. And Jason was letting it happen. Worse, he was enabling it. When I confronted him that night, his patience snapped. "You think this is easy for me?" he demanded. "Watching your father implode? Wondering if creditors will sniff around here?" "They can't take this house," I said. He stared at me. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Positive. The intensity in his voice made my stomach twist. "Yes," I repeated. He leaned closer. "Because if that's not true, Harper, I need to know now." It wasn't fear in his eyes. It was strategy. That's when I understood something chilling. Linda wasn't improvising. She was conditioning, reducing my confidence, isolating me, reframing the narrative so that if something drastic happened, it would feel inevitable.
And Jason?
He wasn't passive. He was patient, waiting, observing, calculating. The house that once felt like a gift now felt like a test. And I was being quietly repositioned from wife to burden, from partner to obstacle. They thought I was too distracted by my father's crisis to notice, too emotional to see patterns, too dependent to resist. They were wrong, because humiliation, when endured quietly, sharpens you. And I had started paying attention, very, very closely. The tenderness returned so suddenly it felt rehearsed. Jason brought me a glass of water one evening while I was folding laundry. He hadn't done that in months. "You look exhausted," he said softly. I studied him. This was the tone he used when closing a deal. Measured.
Warm.
Intentional. "I'm fine," I replied. He sat beside me on the edge of the bed. "I've been thinking," he began, "about your dad." "Of course. He doesn't deserve to drown," Jason continued. "Whatever mistakes he made." The concern sounded almost convincing. Almost. "I spoke to someone," he said carefully. "There might be a way to help him stabilize." I didn't respond immediately. "Refinancing," he added. "The Tahoe house has significant equity. If we leverage it short-term, we could float him through the lender pressure." The air in the room shifted. "You want to put debt on this house?" I asked. "It's temporary," he said quickly. "Bridge financing. 30, maybe 60 days. And if Dad recovers? We close it out. No harm done." He reached for my hand. "I know things have been tense, but this is what family does, Harper. We step up." Family. The word landed differently now. "You do that?" I asked. He squeezed my fingers. "Of course. I'm not heartless." The irony was almost elegant. The next morning he was even gentler. Coffee already made. My favorite mug waiting. Linda conveniently absent, visiting a friend in Sacramento. Jason placed a thick stack of documents on the island. "I need your signature on a few items so I can handle the lender discussions directly," he said. "Why can't we review them together?" "We can," he replied smoothly. "But timing matters. The lender's terms shift daily. If we hesitate, rates spike." He flipped through pages quickly, tapping signature lines with a pen. "This one authorizes me to negotiate. This one confirms consent to refinance. This one is a temporary authorization, so I can sign on your behalf if they need immediate processing." Temporary authorization. The phrase lingered. "Why can't I just sign myself?" I asked. "Because sometimes they need same-day execution," he said. "And you've been under stress. I don't want you juggling lender calls." Concern again. Protective. Carefully constructed. I flipped through the pages. Legal language. Dense paragraphs. Numbers that made my pulse quicken. Jason leaned closer. "Harper," he said gently, "if we don't move fast, your father could lose everything." There it was. The pressure point. He knew exactly where to press. "I just need to understand." I began. He exhaled, not angrily, but with rehearsed fatigue. "You either trust me, or you don't." Silence. "You think I'd hurt you?" he asked quietly. The audacity almost made me smile. He slid the pen toward me. "Sign." "Let me fix this." Fix. As if he were the savior. As if he hadn't been slowly dismantling my footing for weeks. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Protect yourself. Jason watched my face carefully. No rush in his body, but urgency in his eyes. He needed this. That was clear. Just here, he said, tapping again. And here. And here. I signed. Each stroke deliberate. Each page turned quickly. He gathered the stack immediately once I finished. Good, he said, relief flashing too brightly. I'll handle everything. He kissed my forehead, a gesture so foreign now it felt staged. That afternoon, he left for meetings. He didn't return until after midnight. The next morning, he was distant again.
Cold.
Efficient. The tenderness gone. I found the kitchen empty. The documents gone. Linda's car back in the driveway. She greeted me with a faint smile. All set, she asked Jason as he walked past her. All set, he replied. They didn't include me in the conversation. I stood there, something tightening in my chest. I told myself it was anxiety, stress. But deep down, something colder was forming. Because the speed of his mood shift wasn't relief. It was completion. And I had the sudden, terrifying sense that I had just signed something far more permanent than a refinance. I just didn't know how much it was about to cost me. 3 days after I signed the documents, Jason asked me to meet him in the kitchen. His tone was neutral, almost bored. Linda was seated at the island already, hands folded, posture straight. She looked like she was attending a board meeting. Jason placed another folder on the marble. This won't take long, he said. Something inside me went very still. He didn't sit beside me. He stood across from me. Opposite. Like counsel. What is this? I asked. Clarity, he replied. He opened the folder and slid a single document toward me. A recorded deed transfer. My name. My signature. The Tahoe property.
Conveyed. To him.
Sole ownership. For a second, the words refused to make sense. That's not the refinance paperwork, I said quietly. He tilted his head. No, he agreed. It isn't. Linda exhaled softly, almost pleased. You said it was authorization, I continued, my voice steady despite the ringing in my ears. It was, Jason said smoothly. Authorization to execute necessary property adjustments. That's not what you said. He shrugged. You should read more carefully. The audacity was surgical. You tricked me. No, he corrected calmly. You trusted me. The cruelty in that sentence was almost elegant. My pulse slowed instead of racing. Shock does that. It clears everything. You transferred my share, I said. You transferred your share, he replied. Voluntarily. Signed and notarized. Notarized. Of course. He must have arranged the mobile notary during his meetings. Linda leaned forward. Marriage is partnership, Harper. Sometimes one partner takes the lead. I looked at her. This was planned. Jason didn't deny it. He didn't need to. He walked to the window, staring out at the lake like he owned it already. Here's what's going to happen, he said calmly. You'll sign the annulment. You'll vacate within 48 hours. And we'll all move on. And if I don't, he turned back to me, then I enforce my rights as sole owner. You think this makes you powerful? I asked quietly. I think it makes me protected. Protected. From me. From my father. From risk. You told my father you'd call security, I said. I will, he replied without hesitation. Linda folded her hands tighter. There's no need for ugliness, Harper. Sign and preserve what dignity you have left.
Dignity.
From the woman who had turned me into unpaid staff. You committed fraud, I said evenly. Jason's expression hardened slightly. Careful. I signed under false representation. You signed under marital trust. He smiled faintly. And trust isn't a legal defense. The precision of his wording told me everything. He had consulted someone. Prepared language. Rehearsed. You've been planning this since the barbecue, I said. He didn't answer. Which was answer enough. You waited for my father's weakness. I continued. You overestimate your importance, he replied coldly. This is business. Business. 5 years of marriage reduced to transaction. Linda stood. We've been more than patient, she said. You brought instability into this family. Jason corrected it. Corrected it. I let the silence stretch. They expected tears, accusations, a scene. Instead, I pulled the deed closer and read every line carefully. Instrument number, recording date, county seal. It was real, technically flawless, buried inside the refinance stack. My signature sat neatly at the bottom, controlled, legible, damning. Jason watched my face for collapse. It didn't come. You're very confident, I said quietly. I'm practical. You think this ends cleanly? It already has. He slid the annulment papers toward me again. Sign. The lake outside shimmered in afternoon light. Beautiful. Untouched. Unaware of the rot inside its glass walls. You miscalculated, I said softly. Jason actually laughed.
No, Harper.
You did. I stood slowly. You wanted me gone quietly. Yes. That won't happen. He rolled his eyes. You lost. Did I? On paper, perhaps. In that moment, legally, the house was his. But I saw something he didn't. Overconfidence. Exposure. He believed the deed made him untouchable. He believed my father was collapsing. He believed I was isolated. He believed the game was over. And that certainty? That was his mistake. I'm not signing anything else today, I said calmly. Jason's jaw tightened. You have 48 hours. I walked past him without another word. Not to pack. Not to cry. But to think. Because if he believed I had just handed him the house, he had no idea what he had actually triggered. I showed up to court alone. Jason arrived like a man attending a business conference. Tailored suit. Polished shoes. Expression composed. Beside him walked a sharp-looking attorney with a leather portfolio and the kind of smile that said she billed by the minute and enjoyed it. Linda followed a few steps behind them, chin lifted. I wore navy. Simple.
Clean.
Controlled. No dramatics. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls. Fluorescent lighting. A judge who looked tired before we even began. Jason's attorney presented first. Your Honor, she began smoothly. The petitioner voluntarily executed a property transfer and later declined to vacate the premises upon lawful request from the sole title holder. Sole title holder. It sounded so final. So this is a simple matter of enforcement, she concluded. The annulment filing further clarifies the dissolution of marital intent. I didn't flinch. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Reed, do you dispute your signature on the deed? No, I said calmly. Do you allege forgery?
No.
Coercion. I paused. I allege misrepresentation. Jason's attorney smiled faintly. Your Honor, the documentation clearly indicates informed consent. Notarized. Properly recorded. The petitioner had full opportunity to review. The judge adjusted his glasses. Do you have evidence of deception, Mrs. Reed? Recordings?
No.
Witnesses?
No.
Paper trail?
Not yet.
I held his gaze. No, Your Honor. Jason didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, jaw firm. The ruling was brief. The deed stands. The property transfer valid. The annulment proceedings to continue separately. Jason's attorney placed a hand lightly on his arm, satisfied. Linda exhaled in relief. On paper, I had just lost my home. But as the judge dismissed us, something inside me remained perfectly steady. Because losing publicly has a strange effect. It removes illusion. Jason stepped into the hallway and finally looked at me. It didn't have to go this way, he said quietly. No, I agreed. It didn't. You can still make this clean. Clean for who? I asked. For you, he replied. That was almost amusing. Linda approached. You embarrassed yourself today, she murmured, dragging this into court without proof. I met her eyes. This isn't over. Jason gave a short laugh. It is. He walked away, confident.
Certain.
Victorious. I drove back to Tahoe alone. The house stood exactly as I had left it.
Still.
Beautiful. Technically, no longer mine. Jason expected to find it empty when he arrived later. He expected packed boxes.
Tears.
Submission. Instead, I was in the kitchen making tea when he walked in. He froze. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Living here," I said calmly. "You lost." "In court," I replied. "Not in reality." His patience cracked slightly. "I am the sole owner. And I am still legally your wife. Annulment is in motion, not finalized." He stared at me like I was speaking a language he didn't understand. "You can't just ignore a ruling." "I'm not ignoring it," I said. "I'm choosing not to disappear." Linda entered behind him. "This is pathetic," she snapped. "You have no claim." "Then removing me should be simple," I replied evenly. "File for enforcement. Call your security." Jason's nostrils flared. He didn't want spectacle. He wanted quiet compliance. He wanted me small. Instead, I sat at my island, and sipped my tea. "You're making this worse," he said. "For you?" I asked. His silence answered. Because here was the truth he hadn't calculated. He could win paperwork. But optics? Narrative? Timing? Those were still fluid. "You think stubbornness equals strength," he muttered. "No," I said softly. "Stillness does." That night, he slept in the guest room. Linda stayed unusually quiet. I lay in the master bedroom staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every signature, every shift in tone, every coordinated move. They thought I was cornered. But something didn't sit right. Jason had moved too quickly, too confidently, as if he believed the entire board was already arranged in his favor. And men who believe that often miss the piece they never saw. The next morning, Jason made another call. This time, he didn't bother stepping outside. He put it on speaker deliberately. "Mr. Bennett," he said brightly, "your daughter is refusing to vacate." My stomach tightened. He was escalating. Publicly. Humiliating my father again. 1 hour. Jason repeated into the phone. "Or I involve private security." I stood there listening, waiting for devastation in my father's voice. Instead, I heard something else.
Calm. Deep.
Controlled. And that was when I realized this story wasn't finished. Not even close. Jason didn't mute the call. He wanted me to hear it. He wanted my father to hear him. "Owen," he said smoothly, "this is becoming disruptive. Harper is refusing to vacate the property. I'm giving you 1 hour to arrange transport for her. After that, I call security." Silence filled the kitchen. Linda stood beside him, arms crossed. I remained seated. My father's voice came through the speaker.
Calm.
Almost thoughtful. 1 hour, he repeated. "Yes." "You seem very confident, Jason." "I believe in clear boundaries." A pause. Then my father said something unexpected. "Harper, are you there?" "I am." "Stay where you are." Jason's jaw tightened. "Owen, this isn't a negotiation." "No," my father agreed. "It isn't." The call ended. Jason stared at the phone. "That was dramatic," Linda muttered. Jason turned to me. "You really think he can save you?" "I think you should wait," I said quietly.
"For what?" he snapped.
"You'll see." 30 minutes later, Jason walked to the window. His posture shifted. "Who is that?" he asked. I stood slowly and joined him. The long driveway that curved toward the lake was filling. Not with a taxi. Not with a moving truck. With a convoy. Black SUVs. 3. Then 4. Jason's confidence flickered. Linda moved closer to the glass. "This is absurd," she whispered. The first vehicle door opened. My father stepped out. He didn't look wrecked. He didn't look ruined. He looked composed. Measured. Unshaken. The second door opened. And out stepped the person no one had considered important. My Aunt Margaret. Quiet. Soft-spoken. The retired teacher who spent holidays knitting in the corner. The woman Linda once described as pleasant but irrelevant. Margaret adjusted her glasses and surveyed the house like an architect assessing a flawed structure. Jason turned to me slowly. "What is this?" I met his gaze. Clarity.
The doorbell rang.
Jason hesitated, then opened it. My father entered first. No anger. No raised voice. Just presence. Margaret followed, carrying a slim leather folder. Jason tried to recover his composure. "Owen," he began, "this spectacle is unnecessary." "Is it?" my father asked mildly. Linda stepped forward. "You threatened our son." "No," Margaret interrupted gently. "He threatened first."
Her voice was calm.
"Educated."
Precise.
Jason frowned. "And you are?" She smiled faintly. "Family counsel." Linda blinked. "You're a teacher." "I was," Margaret replied. "For 6 months. 40 years ago." Silence. Margaret placed the folder on the island. "Jason," she said evenly, "you've made several strategic errors." "I've done nothing illegal," he shot back. Margaret opened the folder. "Perhaps," she said, "but you have done something recorded." Jason's expression changed. "Excuse me?" My father pulled out his phone. "You see," he said calmly, "when you called earlier this week and threatened to remove my daughter with security, I recorded the conversation." Jason's face strained slightly. Linda's posture stiffened. Margaret continued. "And when you called today repeating that threat, that too was recorded." Jason laughed nervously. "That's not illegal." "No," Margaret agreed. "But it is revealing." She slid a document across the counter. "Before we continue," she added, "there's something you should understand about the so-called collapse." Jason's jaw tightened. "What collapse?" "The Seacliff project," my father said. Jason's eyes sharpened.
Yes.
"The one that imploded." My father held his gaze. "It didn't." Silence. Linda blinked. "What?" she whispered. "There were delays," my father continued calmly. "But no lender acceleration. No forced liquidation." Jason stared at him. "You said." "I said I might lose everything," my father replied evenly. "I never said I had." Margaret folded her hands. "It was a stress test." Jason's voice rose. "A what?" "A loyalty test," she clarified. "For who?" Linda demanded. "For you," Margaret said softly. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller. "You fabricated financial distress?" Jason asked, disbelief cracking through. "We simulated vulnerability," my father corrected. To observe response. "And you recorded my reaction?" Jason snapped. "We documented behavior," Margaret said. Jason looked at me. "You knew?" "No," I said honestly. "Not at first." My father's eyes softened briefly toward me. "You were not part of the test," he said quietly. Jason ran a hand through his hair. "This is insane." "No," Margaret replied. "It's thorough." She tapped the folder again. "And unfortunately for you, Jason, you walked directly into it." For the first time since he dropped those annulment papers on the island, Jason looked uncertain. "And uncertainty is the beginning of collapse." Jason tried to laugh. It came out thin. "You staged a fake collapse to test me?" he asked. Margaret didn't blink. "We staged a liquidity scare," she corrected. "There's a difference." My father stepped closer to the island. "You accelerated your timeline the moment you believed Harper had lost financial value." Jason's eyes flicked to me, then back to them. "You can't prove intent." Margaret smiled slightly. "Oh, intent isn't our strongest card." She pulled another document from the folder. "The Tahoe house," she continued calmly, "was never owned the way you believed." Jason's posture stiffened. "It was deeded into both our names." "Yes," Margaret said, "but held inside a revocable family trust." Linda frowned. "That's standard estate planning." "It is," Margaret agreed, "with one important clause." She slid the page toward him. "In the event of marital dissolution, divorce, or annulment, any unilateral transfer of interest automatically voids." Silence. Jason stared at the paper. "That's not possible." "It's recorded," Margaret replied. "Filed before your refinance paperwork." I watched the realization crawl across his face. "The moment you filed for annulment," she continued softly, "the trust provision activated." My father folded his hands. "Meaning the deed transfer Harper signed, under misrepresentation, becomes legally worthless the second the marriage ends. Jason looked at me, then back at them. That's a loophole. No, Margaret corrected. It's a safeguard. Linda's voice trembled slightly. So he doesn't own it?
He never did, Margaret said.
Jason's jaw flexed. You're bluffing. Margaret slid a certified copy of the trust instrument across the counter. County recorded. Time-stamped. Prior to your transfer. His confidence cracked visibly now. You manipulated her into signing, my father added quietly. But you targeted an asset you never truly controlled. Jason's breathing changed.
Faster.
Angrier. You set me up. Margaret tilted her head.
No.
You revealed yourself. Jason slammed a hand against the island. This is harassment. Not quite, Margaret said. She reached into the folder one final time. And then there's the lender. Jason froze. What about the lender? He asked carefully. The gentleman you met at the Sacramento hotel, she continued. The one you discussed resale projections with. Linda looked confused. Resale? She whispered. Margaret's voice remained steady. He wasn't a lender. Jason's face strained. He was internal audit from your employer. The silence was suffocating. You were recorded, she added, explaining how you intended to sell the Tahoe property quickly and split profits with a third-party fixer. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. That's not, Jason began. It is, my father said quietly. We forwarded the recording to your company's compliance division yesterday. Jason looked like someone had pulled oxygen from the room. They won't.
They already have, Margaret said.
As of this morning, you're suspended pending investigation for fraud, misrepresentation, and potential bribery exposure. Linda staggered back into a chair. Jason's composure shattered. You can't do this, he snapped at me. I hadn't moved. You did, I said calmly. He turned desperate now. Harper, tell them this is insane. We can fix this.
Fix.
There was that word again. You told me to sign quickly before the lender changed terms, I said softly. His silence answered. Margaret closed the folder. Here are your options, she said evenly. You and your mother sign an agreement vacating this property immediately. You withdraw the annulment petition. You relinquish any claim to trust assets. And if we don't, Linda asked weakly. Margaret met her eyes. We proceed. The word hung heavy.
Fraud.
Bribery. Corporate misconduct. Jason's career. His reputation. His mother's precious social circle. All balanced on a thin edge. Jason's shoulders sagged. He looked smaller. Not defeated.
Exposed.
How long do we have? He muttered. 30 minutes, Margaret replied. The same deadline he had given my father. The papers were signed at the same kitchen island where he had dropped the annulment envelope. No speeches. No shouting. Just ink. By sunset, the SUVs escorted them out. Jason paused at the doorway. He looked at me like he expected mercy. I never meant for it to go this far, he said quietly. I held his gaze. You did. Months later, he lost his job officially. Linda's social circle dissolved quickly once investigation rumors spread. There were no criminal charges. Margaret had no interest in spectacle. Only correction. Jason came back once.
Alone.
Unshaven. Eyes hollow. I made a mistake, he said. Yes, I agreed. I was scared. No, I said calmly. You were opportunistic. He looked like he might cry. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just clarity. I don't hate you, I told him. I understand you. And that was worse. I closed the door gently. I kept the house. Not because of revenge. Because it was never his to take. I launched a small design studio 6 months later. Community projects. Affordable housing concepts. Grounded work. Quiet impact. No glitter. No spectacle. Just substance. Years passed. I met someone new. Not impressive on paper. But steady.
Kind.
Unafraid of imbalance because he didn't measure love in assets. I chose differently. Because now I could see the signs. The Tahoe Lake still turns silver in the mornings. still and reflective. Sometimes I stand at the window and think about the day Jason dropped those papers on the island. He believed he was removing me from the board. He believed I had lost value. He believed he was smarter. But the truth is simple. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. And I never had to raise my voice to watch it happen.